Our main speaker will be Mary Tabin, and she's a member at Miller Johnson and has been practicing law since 1998. She's an attorney in Miller Johnson's Employment and Labor Section Wage and Hour Practice Group. And I am going to go ahead and take her bio and share it on the group chat if you would like to learn more about her. But I'm going to have Mary go ahead and take over. She already, as you can see, has a PowerPoint ready for all of us to follow along with. If you do have any questions, I encourage you to go ahead and post them in the group chat. I will be monitoring those questions, and we hope that you stay engaged and really take in all that Mary has to share with us in regards to her expertise. Mary, good morning.
Good morning, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me, and good morning, everyone. As Jennifer stated, feel free to ask questions. We live in such an uncertain but yet fast-paced time that you may have all seen that we just received 2 executive orders late yesterday that in fact impact our employment community. So some of these slides where I have these are things you should consider will be considered must now based on these executive orders. And it's hard to believe that a few months ago we didn't have any executive orders, and yet we are now at executive order 92. So things are certainly happening fast. So how I would like to treat our time together today is the first 10 slides or so is just basically where have we been, where are we now. There has been a misconception that I have seen where these executive orders, it's oftentimes easy to forget that some older executive orders are still in play with our employers, and for us to be able to make sure that we still stay mindful of. So just going to remind you of a few older executive orders that have not been superseded that are still highly relevant to your employees and for HR. As we're looking to bringing back employees or continuing to keep the staff that we need. So where are we? As you know, we're still in a global pandemic that appears unlikely to disappear for a long time here. And our Michigan Stay Home Order is still right now in effect for a couple more weeks. And as you all can appreciate, our unemployment rate in Michigan exceeds even the bleakest expectations. So unemployment agency was taxed with having more of our Michiganders file for unemployment than they did for the entire year last year. So they continue to be taxed with resources on that. So our discussion is really turning today is when and how to reopen our businesses and workplaces with COVID-19 still present, because it is COVID-19 is still going to be here for an indefinite amount of time, but as you all can see, we are reopening Michigan slowly but surely. So what do we know right now? We know that there are some executive orders that are still in place. A big one here for our employees in our workforce is Executive Order 36. So you'll want to remember that. That is the one where employees can self-mandate themselves to quarantine themselves without a doctor's note. If they, of course, have COVID-19, if they experience symptoms of COVID-19, which of course is a atypical cough, atypical shortness of breath, or a fever. And yet employees can also stay home if they have come in close contact with either someone that's been COVID-19 or symptoms. So the main thing to remember here is that is going to continue to stay in effect, and we cannot terminate or discipline an employee if they fail to provide a doctor's note that supports what they are saying. Regarding Executive Order 59, to the extent that you provide in-person operations, this has been modified by Executive Order 77, which was a more recent one. And this one requires a whole host of requirements I'm not going to spend that much time on because this has sort of not been superseded by Executive Order 91 that was issued yesterday, but all of the things that you're seeing here are also included in Executive Order 91 and what we are going to be talking about later. If you are in the food selling industry, Executive Order 60 is still in play. And Executive Order 70, where if you are in a manufacturing facility where before you could only employ critical infrastructure employees or basic minimum employees, you can now rehire employees that do resumed activities, that process and fulfill remote orders for goods for delivery or curbside pickup. And there are certain additional requirements there. Executive Order 70, which was issued a few weeks ago, also has additional requirements for construction to those participants that are in the construction industry. You'll want to continue to be mindful of Executive Order 70. Executive Order 77 caught a lot of attention because it allowed manufacturing facilities to largely open, but with additional information, additional requirements. And one of the requirements was not only did they need to offer face masks, but they needed to require employees in their workforce that if they could not maintain 6 feet apart constantly, and constantly means all the time, no breaks in between, even for 30 seconds, if they could not maintain 6 feet apart from each other constantly, they were required to wear face masks. And we saw that requirement continue into Executive Order 91 that was just issued yesterday. So Executive Order 77 is still very highly relevant, but it has also been restated in Executive Order 91. So that gets us to where we've been with our executive orders. So what do we know? What seems certain in Michigan now as we go forward with trying to open? And as I stated earlier, the governor did issue 2 rather lengthy executive orders yesterday, Executive Order 91 and Executive Order 92. So Executive Order 91 is one that you will want to read if you haven't already, because it is a roadmap to every industry opening up in Michigan. It does not give a time frame for when certain industries are going to open up that haven't already, but it certainly gives preparation for what should be happening now as you prepare to reopen or you prepare to continue to bring back more employees onto your work staff. Executive Order 92, I'm just going to briefly mention. It doesn't add any additional requirements, but it looks like she is going to start opening by region. And so Executive 92 allowed businesses to open, such as restaurants that seem like a foreign concept here in West Michigan right now, to open at 50%, but that is up north in Traverse City, in the UP, and things of that. She is opening that region. She has yet to open our region, but if you tuned in to her press conference last night, she had indicated that these 2 executive orders may not be the only executive orders issued yet this week. So we'll have to stay tuned with that. So it does seem certain, though, that she will be doing the re-engagement will be phased, and the lowest risk employers will be opening first, and the highest risk employers, perhaps much to our dismay, such as barbers and hair salons and those types of things, may be opening last. And she will continue to limit public gatherings. And as businesses open, they obviously will be required to implement measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So I just want to pause here a minute to to talk about what we do know about COVID-19, because there's a lot of fear amongst our work staff and our employees regarding COVID-19, that they do not want to come to work because they are fearful of getting it themselves, or they are fearful of taking it and transmitting it to a loved one that may be at risk, or that they are caring for someone that is at risk. So it is important for us as employers to continue to speak the truth about COVID-19, and that the greatest risk of transmission is through touching our eyes, our nose, and mouth. It is not an airborne germ, as we would imagine, that is just floating out there. It is those that if you touch a high point area, if you touch someone that has COVID-19, if you touch an area that has COVID-19 virus on it, and you wash your hands, or you never touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, you will never get COVID-19. And it is an easy to kill virus with soap and disinfection. So the greatest opportunity to minimize workplace spread is to encourage and enforce hand washing, and of course to enhance cleaning and disinfection of high touch surfaces throughout the day. Social distancing is going to be a requirement. We saw that in Executive 91, which I will get into a little bit further down the slide. And as employers, we're all required to provide masks to our workforce, and we are going to be required to force employees to wear masks if they cannot constantly stay 6 feet apart. And employers are also, to the extent that you haven't, under Executive 91, there is also going to be a requirement for health assessments and at times temperature checks for our workforce. And it's a requirement to keep those records of you providing those health assessments. The good news is that Executive Order 91, even though it's pretty extensive and it provides at least 20 additional requirements for businesses, there's not a lot that's new on there, or at least that we haven't heard of, because we know a lot from the CDC and our experience of living in the COVID-19 world. Back in March, we didn't know a heck of a lot. And there was a lot of how do we contain this? How do we prevent the spread? But we don't live in that world anymore. We do know from experiences from our corporate citizens that were critical infrastructure businesses and other employers that have continued in-person operations over the last several weeks. And that is where the rest of my slides are going to focus. Is when I prepared these slides, Executive Order 91 didn't exist because it was just issued yesterday. So most of these slides I was going to present as these are things that are going to happen. You would be engaged in best practices if this happens. But now the best practices are now going to become requirements, because unlike the previous executive orders where if employers violated an order, it was a misdemeanor, which is certainly no small measure, but we also knew that police officers and law enforcement weren't knocking on our doors arresting employers for violating those. Well, because of some political issues that were happening, that opportunity was largely taken away from the governor. And so now a violation of these orders that are going to be taking immediate effect for those that are working or have their operations open right now, it is going to be an OSHA violation, which is significant, because the OSHA violation is that you as the employer is not providing a safe workplace for your employees. And OSHA has a big hammer. It can impose all sorts of fines and even shut down your operations. So these restrictions, regardless of whether we think constitutionally or otherwise that she is allowed to do that. This is currently the law here in Michigan regarding employers who want to continue to operate during COVID-19. So the things that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation are things that are required. Okay. The very first one is one that you may have heard before. They have been in executive orders previously, but they have been only required for certain industries. But it is clear now that employers must develop a COVID-19 preparedness and response plan that is consistent with the recommendations developed by OSHA, and I have listed the hyperlink there for you to look at what that preparedness and response plan must look like. But in general, that response plan is going to identify your COVID-19 worksite person that is going to be in charge of managing it. Think of it somebody like your safety manager or somebody that's in charge of safety at your organization. That is what this COVID-19 work site supervisor is going to be. It identifies potential sources of spread. You want to think of this preparedness and response plan as a communication piece, a one-stop shop where you're going to identify potential sources to spread COVID-19 and establish risk categories for your employees. So if you have employees that are back in a warehouse and they don't interact with visitors and it's very easy to stay 6 feet apart, they're going to be low risk, and there is going to be certain additional measures or lower measures, less measures for them, as opposed to somebody who's high risk. And think of high risk as somebody that's working at Meijer, that is checking out your groceries every day. That is a high risk employee. And it will list your worksite preventive measures on that. So that is a requirement for every employer in Michigan now. And it is a requirement by June 1 or within 2 weeks of resuming your business, whichever is later. And this plan must be readily available to employees, customers, and so whether it's on your website, your internal network, or by hard copy, an employee or customer must be able to access it if they want it.
So I think, Mary, this would be a great time to get any questions that anyone may have. If you do have a question, please insert it in the chat. I know this is a lot, but also just to remind you, this is being recorded. So Grow will share the link after this webinar so that you can go back and listen again if you felt like you missed something. So if there are any questions, please type it and I will ask Mary to answer them. Meanwhile, Mary, go ahead and keep going.
Okay, all right. Yes, I know that this is a lot, but once you really roll up your sleeves, and I suspect most of you have been thinking of this or implementing this already, this really is, even though these executive orders keep on getting longer and longer in length, by large part, they are saying the same thing and reinforcing the same thing. They're just applying it to more employers. The second thing that you will want to do is, as you prepare and as you continue to try to staff your facility, is identify your available workforce. So this has been a big struggle for HR folks is, hey, we had to lay off employees, we want them to return to work, and employees are being reluctant to return to work for all sorts of reasons, whether it is concern about health reason or whether they want to stay on unemployment because it's very darn attractive right now with that $600 enhanced kicker. So you want to be mindful of when you can push hard for employees to come back to work and when you have to give them leave. So Once you return employees back to work or you recall them and say, we have work for you to do, they now become your employees, even if they immediately say, I can't come back to work on May 20th, on Wednesday, because of I have an underlying health concern, or I've been advised to self-quarantine, or I'm available because my kids are still home, and I have COVID-19 related school issues, or I have symptoms, or I've come close in contact with individuals. There's a myriad of issues that employees can say but why they cannot come back to work. And so some are legally protected, some require a paid leave of absence, and some are not legally protected at all. So folks that just are fearful of coming back to work because they don't want to contract COVID-19, or that they want to stay on unemployment a bit longer because they're making more unemployment and they don't want to come back to work, those categories are not protected. And so you can force them and say, I understand your concern, but we really need you back. We have a safe work environment. It's an opportunity to explain all that you're doing to create a safe work environment. And then you're stating, look, I don't want you to make a bad decision here. We'll give you 24-hour decisional leave to determine what you're going to do, but we need you back by May 20th, or we will have to replace you, and you will lose your benefits and whatnot. So those where you're not legally protected to provide anything, you can be as forceful as you want, depending on how much you need your staff back immediately. But here's where that Executive Order 36 that we briefly talked about before will come into play. So employees that state that they're suffering COVID-19 symptoms, or they've come in close contact with an individual that has COVID-19 symptoms. Again, close contact means within 6 feet for 10 continuous minutes or more. So if they live with someone that they feel like have COVID-19 symptoms, we would be required to allow them those 14 days to not report to work. Now, we don't have to pay them for that. They may be able to collect unemployment, but they would be back on we would have to give them a leave of absence. The other issue that you want to consider is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA. So this applies to all employers that have 500 or less employees. So any employers that are not in healthcare, that have 1 employee, 2 employees, 3 employees, this federal law governs you. And the FFCRA is required to be posted as of April 1 at your work site. And so for those that have not been paying a lot of attention because you may have been shut down during this time and you're gearing back up, you'll definitely want to get that FFCRA poster and post it, and it lists 6 qualifying reasons why an employee may not only may they be prevented from coming to work and that you're required to give them a leave of absence, but you're required to pay them for that leave of absence. And there are certain limitations and requirements, but it's essentially an employee can take a 2-week paid leave of absence. And there's federal tax credits for that. We could probably spend a whole hour on the FFCRA, but wanted to make sure you knew that was out there. So when you have employees that are saying, I can't come to work, you'll want to make sure that you're kind of wearing all 3 hats. You're wearing the FFCRA to analyze what if they're saying falls under that. Then you'll want to wear your Executive Order 36 hat to see if what they're saying falls under that. And then you want to wear your hat where they don't fall in any bucket and that you can force them to come back to work.
Mary, we do have a question that I would like to ask you on behalf of one of our participants. Does this plan apply to restaurants that are only doing curbside pickup, or is it when they open their dining rooms?
And what plan is that? The
Uh,
the response plan?
I believe that is what she's referring to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Griselda, if that's what you're referring to. Yes, the OSHA plan.
Yes, yep, it applies right now, regardless of what, because that plan is for your employees as much as it is for your customers. So even if you're providing just curbside pickup, if you have one employee that's reporting to work or doing anything at the work site, that COVID-19 preparedness plan is in play. Good question.
Thank you, Griselda. If anyone else, again, has a question, feel free to type it in the chat and we'll answer them as they come. Mary, go ahead.
Okay. What else do we need to do as we are continuing in our COVID-19 world is communicate. And this I cannot underscore enough, is we not only, of course, need to have our employees be safe, but we need to make them feel safe. And the best way we do that is we ramp up our communication. And it doesn't matter if it's the same communication that we have said 10 times before about washing your hands or remembering to not touch your face. There is no shortage of free resources on the internet where you can essentially communicate the same thing differently, but the main thing is to communicate. So your employees feel like and know that you care for them, and you're demonstrating the knowledge of how COVID-19 is transmitted. So they know that when they look at their HR, they look to you as their employer, that you are knowledgeable and you're taking care of it and you're on top of everything. So the Michigan coronavirus site is a great resource. The CDC website is a great resource. OSHA guidance is a great resource. You may have seen last week, I believe, Spectrum Health provided an employer toolkit free on its website, and an employer guide, and great resource for able to perhaps cut and paste some of those things to send to your workforce. So you want to educate your employees on their responsibility to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And I just want to pause at this site right here, is because not only are those good safety measures, but now under Executive Order 91, all employers that are back in business or will be back in business must provide COVID-19 training to their employees. Now, you don't have to. There's a lot of resources out there that are saying, here, buy this training. You can do this for free by looking at different websites that I just mentioned. And training doesn't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be video. It can be putting documents on or information on a piece of paper and providing that training that way. The important thing, though, is it is required to keep records of your training. So think of it as a new policy that you have implemented, where you have your employees sign off that they've read it and understood and have been able to ask questions. That is what you want to do with the training.
Mary, we do have another question. What documents and records should we keep in our files when we call employees back to work?
Great question. So when you call employees back to work, the documents that you want to keep in your file is, as much as you can, you would want to have a letter that states the recall information and the safety measures that you've done, because that will help if you have somebody that just doesn't want to come back to work that's not covered in the protected categories under FFCRA or Executive Order 36, because you'll need that information for disputing unemployment and for showing that you recalled them back to work. So as you recall them back to work, You'll want to, of course, have your recall letter. You will want to have, it is now required to conduct daily, we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves, but I'd like to address this question, and we can maybe skip over a slide or so, is now that you are required to conduct a daily entry self-screening protocol for all employees. So this we saw in the manufacturing, in the construction industry. This now is going to apply to everyone. So you want to set up a system where you are doing a screening of your employees for COVID-19 symptoms or confirmed exposure to people with COVID-19 or symptoms of COVID-19. And you want to keep a record of that. That is now a requirement. So before we had seen COVID-19 symptom trackers or electronic apps that you could do on phones. Unless you can have a written record of that, those are not going to be sufficient any longer to comply with the record keeping for training. The other record keeping is that you want to verify the training that I just talked about. And you need to have a record of if you have a COVID-19 positive in your workforce. You are now required within 24 hours to notify both the health department and any coworkers, contractors, or suppliers who may have come in contact with the person with a confirmed COVID-19 case. You also need to keep record keeping for those. So I hope that answers your question in a very high level summary, but there are multiple record keeping requirements now in this new Executive Order 91. And I just want to talk about the notice requirement a little bit more when we get into the slide, because there's some specific requirements now that previously weren't in place for employers. So you want to develop a communication plan. That communication plan can be part of your COVID-19 response plan, but the main thing is to communicate with your employees. You'll also, and this is a requirement, it's not even a good thing to do anymore, you are required to enhance your hygiene and disinfectant process. So not only do you want to make sure soap and water is available at all times, you may want to consider additional breaks for hand washing, but you will want to regularly disinfect during the day any commonly touched surfaces, and requiring employees to clean their own workspaces. And in fact, Executive Order 91 now requires when you have an employee come into your work site, you must make cleaning supplies available to them upon entry of the work site. So that is a specific requirement. No longer can they, have to ask for it. You need to provide it upon entry of the work site. And then you're required to do social distancing measures. So again, Executive 91 kind of had hijacked our presentation here, but I do want to make sure that you leave today not thinking these are discretionary, because they've now become mandatory. You are required to keep everyone on your worksite premises at least 6 feet from one another to the maximum extent possible. So that includes putting markers on the ground. If you've seen those at Meijer, where when you're checking out, they have markers, or physical barriers, or whatever you can do to get through to your staff that they must stay 6 feet apart. And if you did have an OSHA complaint, if they came in, you can prove to OSHA what you've done to good faith comply with this. In addition, if you have a work site that has a drinking fountain, you are required under Executive 91 order to put that out of service right now. Any break areas, any places where you think there are choke points, high elevators, you will need to create some sort of protocol so that folks can still maintain 6 feet apart. If folks cannot maintain 6 feet apart, you are required to enforce employees to wear a mask when they are not 6 feet apart. And you need to consider, and this is the one discretionary, you need to consider face shields when an employee cannot consistently maintain 3 feet of separation. So in addition to your supply of face masks that you want to provide and have out there for your employees to use, it's still discretionary if you can keep them 6 feet apart. It's not discretionary if you can't. But you'll also want to try to get a supplies of some face shields so employees can wear those if they feel comfortable doing so. Protective gear, we talked a little bit about that. Again, this slide is no longer valid because of what happened yesterday, where it says face masks likely required. They are required now for all workplaces if you cannot maintain that 6 feet constantly. And I've received a lot of questions from my manufacturing clients that have been under this rule for the past week or so about constantly. What is constantly? Constantly is constantly. It means every single waking moment. So you have an employee that leaves their work site and they need to go down a hallway to go to the bathroom, and that hallway is not a one-way hallway, and there's a risk that somebody passes and they're going to be within 6 feet of each other. You need to require your employees to wear a mask in that situation. Now,
Mary,
most of our West Michigan employees have...
Mary, we do have a
Go ahead,
quick
Jennifer.
question. I think this is a good time to ask this specifically since you're talking about this, but in a restaurant setting, if there is more than one line cook working during the same shift in the same line, will wearing the mask be sufficient to hit those requirements?
So the food industry has additional requirements regarding gloves and things of that nature, but definitely they should be wearing face masks, and I believe they have even additional restrictions. And right now I don't have that executive order right in front of me, but I believe that's executive order. I'm not sure what executive order that is right now. They all kind of run together, but they'll definitely want to look at that one. I think it's executive order 60. So they will want to look at that one for sure.
Thank you.
Another area that you'll want to look at in this kind of can go on the bottom, bottom of your to-do list, as long as you are not negatively impacting your employees. But for sure, the most critical ones are getting your personal protection equipment for your employees and getting that COVID-19 and having those face masks and disinfectants. But you'll also want to look at reviewing and revising your policies during this time, because of course, with the new FFCRA that we talked about in Executive Order 36 that allows more flexibility with leave, you'll not be able just to turn to your handbook and say, well, that doesn't fall under my handbook, so I don't need to provide it, or they need to use up their PTO or their vacation before they take FFCRA or this leave of absence. You want to pause and you want to consider those new laws regarding COVID-19 and revise those policies accordingly. The other requirement now is a health assessment. This, of course, started with the healthcare industry. They've been doing it for a very long time. and then construction and manufacturing have been required to do it for the last couple of weeks. And you all may already be doing it. There's a lot of West Michigan employers that are doing more than what is legally required, because of course what's legally required is a floor, not a ceiling. So that's the bare minimum of what you need to do. But it is clear that you are required to do a health assessment every day, and it has to be in writing. And the screening protocol, asking your employees if they have any COVID-19 symptoms, if they've had contact with confirmed cases within 14 days, if they've had close contact with anyone that has COVID-19 symptoms within 14 days, and if they've done international travel within 14 days. Now, what's interesting is, although the governor required temperature checks for manufacturing folks, she is not requiring temperature checks for the other industries so far. So under Executive Order 91, it does not require temperature checks. And of course, there's lots of plus and minuses regarding whether temperature checks are a good way of screening for symptoms or not. The other requirement that was something that was a best practice before yesterday is now mandatory, is creating a positive test protocol and contact tracing. What I mean by that is you will want to create a document that you have a protocol in place. If you have an employee that tests positive for COVID-19, how are you going to communicate to your employees? How are you going to shut down a facility, a section in your facility or the entire facility? And how are you going to trace that COVID-19 employee to whom they've come in close contact with throughout the workforce? And in fact, I need to correct myself. It's no longer close contact, it's may come in contact. And so I want to spend a little bit of time with that. So a positive test protocol is a document that you create that talks about, if somebody tests positive, what steps are we going to take to be able to do everything we need to do within 24 hours? Because the new requirement is that once you get a COVID-19 positive case, within 24 hours, you need to do two things. You need to, one, contact the local public health department. That's new. That was before, it was discretionary because medical providers are required to do that. Now employers are required to do that. And two, you're required to notify any coworkers, contractors, or suppliers who may have come in contact with the person with a confirmed case of COVID-19. That is very broad. That's much broader than close contact. Remember, close contact is within 6 feet for 10 minutes. May come in contact. So what we have seen is that some employers just notify all their employees that there was a COVID-19 positive employee. Now that's different than contact tracing. So your notice obligation is to notify anybody who may come in contact with your employee. The contact tracing is you're required to quarantine employees that came in close contact with that particular employee. So how do we know whether someone comes in close contact with that positive COVID-19 positive employee? Well, we look at our social distancing measures. And if we are keeping everyone 6 feet apart, then we don't have to quarantine a lot of employees because they will never have come into close contact with that employee because they are over 6 feet apart. If that is not doable and not practical in your workspace and they come within 6 feet, then you may have to quarantine them. Also, in your positive test protocol, you will want to have measures of what you're going to do in that workspace to disinfect and clean so that you are able to communicate with your employees that it's safe to return to work or it's safe to work in that workspace.
Mary, we do have one question here that may be a good one to answer at this point. The filling out of the forms, the assessments, do you rely on the employees to do this themselves, or do you have to designate someone from your company to do that?
Great question. So with these executive orders and quite frankly, all these COVID-19 laws, they're coming so fast that there's a lot of gray areas. And so the executive orders don't say. So when they don't say, that gives the employers the freedom to choose. So
Okay.
you can have the employees fill it out and sign it, or you can have someone, a supervisor, there filling out it for them. The main point is to do the health assessment and to keep record of it. So however it works in your workforce is what I would recommend doing.
So just to remind everybody, I know we're coming towards the last 10 minutes of this webinar. Mary is so kind enough that she is going to share this PowerPoint as well, and Rosie will be sharing that with all of the participants today. And that way you can actually visually see it if you don't want to watch the recorded segment as well. So thank you for doing that, Mary. We appreciate it.
Sure. And just a reminder, though, whenever you're looking at these slides, you want to look at it with Executive Order 91 in mind. And if Executive Order 91 says something different than what these slides, please follow Executive Order 91. The other requirement is that you'll want to procure. You'll want to procure a lot of supplies. And of course, these supplies are all in high demand. And so you'll want to demonstrate good faith effort to get these supplies if you don't have them. So tissues, no touch disposal, cleaning and disinfectant supplies, all of these things that, you know, masks that will make your employees feel safe and that are required under these executive orders. I know lots of employers are still waiting for masks to come in, are still waiting for disinfectants to be able to adequately put out. To the extent that you are still waiting for those, you'll want to just hit the print button or electronically save your order so it can show that you have it in order, you're waiting, or whatever steps that you're doing to show that you're procuring the items that you need to procure during this time. The other best practice to consider is plan to communicate with your customers, suppliers, and other business partners. So to the extent that you have customers coming into your facility, you want your customers to feel safe just like your employees do. So you want to have enhanced signage, communication, however you communicate with your customers via email. You'll want to sort of treat them how you treating your employees right now. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And you'll also, if you have customers that need to come in to your entry, you want to communicate in writing that they should not come in. If they are feeling sick, that you have enhanced hygiene and social distancing requirements. Whatever you can do to, again, make your customers and your employees feel safe is what you should do. Other considerations, and these are things that may be unique with your workforce, but you'll want to consider if you obviously operate a warehouse or things like that where you can increase ventilation and circulating outdoor air. You'll want to take a look at those. You'll also want to, a good communication tool regarding other considerations is asking your employees for advice. While you're communicating and providing information regarding all that you're doing, ask your employees what kind of recommendations they have or what kind of ideas they have to adhere to social distancing or enhanced safety measures. Not that you have to take everything that they say, but a lot of this is good employee relations 101, right? Making employees feel heard during this process, especially since this executive order is going to seem familiar to them regarding, oh, I can just call OSHA now and complain about my employer instead of calling the police on them, which seems foreign. But OSHA doesn't seem so foreign because I'm kind of used to that. And that's an organization that I kind of associate with my employer. And so you will want to make sure that you do as much as you possibly can, so that if you do have an employee that makes a complaint with OSHA, that you're able to show, just like with any other safety measure, that you are complying with these laws. You also want to evaluate work-related travel. So that is a requirement now, that you are required to restrict business-related travel for employees to essential travel only. And again, they don't define what essential travel only is. That is going to be unique to your business. But what I would say is you want to have something that makes sense, that seems plausible, so that if you do get a complaint and it's written up in MLive or something, that a reader reads it and go, yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense that somebody needed to go to Hawaii for 14 days, whatnot. So you'll want to look at your travel requirements during this time. And then you'll want to plan for potential attendance concerns. This has been a real concern for at least my employers, is the shortage of staff being willing to come into work. So you'll want to enhance cross-training efforts. You may want to look at temp agencies. And if you haven't already, there are plenty of employers that have done incentive pay, especially if you are a recipient of those PPP funds, and you need to bring your employees back to work and you have funds to do it. You may want to provide some incentive pay. Now, that has been received with mixed results regarding some employers that are okay doing that and some employers that do not. So that's not something that is required at all, unless you are in a long-term care facility that has one of those hero pay initiatives that are being brought forth. So that is all that I have prepared for this morning. Jennifer, I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Let's have people contact you, Mary, at this point. I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you would like to contact Mary, her information, like she noted, is there on the screen. Jot that down. And I think that what you've provided for us, like you said, to keep in mind that things are changing rapidly. And so being aware of that and taking all of that into consideration as we navigate through this time is very important. Last thoughts, Mary, just for those who are joining us today, any last thoughts that you think that you would like them to take with them at the end of this webinar?
Yep. So a few things. One, I just wanted to mention, for those that are operating in an office setting, which most employers have some sort of office setting, you'll want to check out Section 7 of Executive Order 91, because that has additional requirements for offices now. And so you'll want to check out that, and it lists A through N requirements now. The second piece is, again, we live in like Jennifer said, we live in a rapidly changing world, and it is very hard to feel on top of things right now. It's often overwhelmed, and not only does HR and leaders feel overwhelmed, but your employees feel overwhelmed. And so you'll want to continue to have great employee relations during this time and checking in with your employees, so that you can make sure that everyone feels comfortable and that they feel like you are listening to them and that you are in sync with them. So if you need any further answers regarding anything that I've said today that needs clarification, happy for you to shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'm happy to chat with you about it.
All right, Mary, thank you so much for taking time today. Thank you to all of the participants. Rosie, any final words for everyone else?
Nope, just to reiterate what you said, there will be a recording of this, and I will also send out the slides. But as we know, we've said once before, but this is ever evolving, so keep that in mind. But Mary, thank you so much for sharing all this, and thank you all who tuned in. Appreciate it from Grove, so thank you.
Thank you.